The children said grace before every meal, never knowing they were thanking their own. In 1894, Sister Magdalena fed the orphans of a remote New Mexico orphanage a dark and twisted meal human soup. Every night, the children said grace before each meal, unknowingly thanking their own flesh. What seemed like a simple act of survival was actually part of a horrific cycle. As they ate, the children didn't just fill their bellies, they lost themselves. Their minds, their identities, and their very souls were consumed by the spirits inside the soup. What they didn't know was that with every bite, they were becoming vessels for the dead. The orphanage in New Mexico was an isolated place, nestled deep in the desert, miles away from the nearest town. To the outside world, it was nothing more than a forgotten structure, its stone walls weathered by time and neglect. But to the children within, it was all they had. They had no families, no homes, and no hope, but they had Sister Magdalena. She was their caretaker, their guardian, and for the longest time, they thought her to be their only savior. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the cold desert night crept in, the children gathered for the same ritual. It was the only consistency in their lives. Sister Magdalena would arrive, her figure long and imposing in the dim light, carrying a steaming pot of thick, hearty soup. The aroma filled the room, thick with the smell of roasted meat, vegetables, and something else is something they could never quite place. The children, their faces hollow from hunger, would line up and wait patiently for their portions. There was no arguing, no question, just silent gratitude. Each child would take their bowl, kneel, and say grace. Bless this food, dear Lord, and the hands that made it. Let it nourish our bodies and keep us strong. It was the same prayer every night. It was a ritual, a comfort in their small world of desolation. They didn't know the truth, that every word they spoke before their meal was a prayer to something much darker than they could imagine. Sister Magdalena would watch them, her face unreadable as they ate. She was always there, her eyes fixed on the children, as though ensuring they consumed every drop. The soup was filling, warm, and comforting, offering them a temporary reprieve from the harsh reality of their lives. The children never questioned it. It was food, and for them, it was enough. But Clara, one of the younger orphans, began to notice something strange. She couldn't explain it at first. It started with the dreams. At night, after the soup settled in her stomach, she would fall into a deep, unshakable sleep. And in that sleep, she would dream of a man she had never met. A man who lived and died long before she was born. His name, his face, and the pain he endured were all so vivid, so real. It wasn't like any dream she had ever had. She would wake up, heart racing, covered in a cold sweat, but with the feeling that she knew him, as if she had experienced his death firsthand. The dreams came every night, and with them came the sense that something inside her was changing, something that wasn't quite right. But the worst part was when she began to feel it during the day too. She would catch glimpses of herself in the cracked mirror, and her own reflection seemed off. For a brief moment, she wouldn't recognize the face staring back at her. It was as though someone else was looking through her eyes. At first, Clara tried to ignore it, but then other children started acting strange too. Samuel, the quiet one, began to speak with an accent that none of the other children recognized. His words, his voice, they sounded like someone from another time, another place. He would recount stories of battles, of countries he had never seen, of things he couldn't possibly know. And the more he spoke, the more the other children listened, mesmerized. They couldn't explain it either, but something about Samuel's stories felt real, too real. Thomas, the oldest boy, had always been the most reserved. He rarely spoke, keeping to himself. But one evening after the soup, Thomas suddenly began to recite long, complex verses in a language none of them could understand. The words flowed effortlessly from his lips, his eyes distant, as if he were hearing the words from someone else. The children stared in awe, unsure of what they were witnessing. Clara, her heart pounding in her chest, approached Sister Magdalena, but the woman's eyes were unreadable, cold even. "Is something wrong with the soup, sister?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sister Magdalena smiled faintly, but there was something chilling about it. "No, child. There is nothing wrong with the soup. It has been made for you, for your strength, for your growth." Clara didn't feel reassured. She felt more unsettled than ever. The days blurred together as the children continued to eat, their hunger driving them to consume the soup with a kind of desperate fervor. But as they ate, something more than their stomachs was being filled. Then came the night when Clara woke up to find Samuel standing in the middle of the room, his eyes wide open, staring at the walls. "Samuel?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. He didn't respond. His body was stiff, as if frozen in place. When she reached out to touch him, her hand brushing against his arm, he suddenly turned to face her. But it wasn't Samuel who looked back at her. It was someone else's man, a man who had been in her dreams, the same man who had died in her sleep, his face twisted in agony. Clara stumbled back, her breath caught in her throat. Samuel's eyes were empty, lifeless. The man's voice, low and distant, echoed in her mind. "You've eaten my flesh, now you are mine." And then it all clicked. The soup, the dreams, the voices. The children weren't just eating food. They were consuming the souls of the dead. The soup wasn't just meat, it was a vessel for the memories of those who had passed. Every bowl they ate, every prayer they said, was part of a curse they could never escape. But Clara wasn't done. She had to know more, and what she would uncover would change everything. Clara's heart raced as she backed away from Samuel, whose eyes now mirrored the man from her dreams. It was impossible to ignore what she had seen. She could unsee it wasn't Samuel anymore. His body was still there, but his soul, that was someone else, someone long dead. She staggered backward, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. The rest of the children were asleep, blissfully unaware of the horrors unfolding around them. But Clara knew. The soup was doing something to them. It was no longer just a meal, it was consuming them, body and soul. The next day, Clara tried to shake the memory of Samuel's transformation from her mind, but the whispers were there, lingering at the edge of her consciousness. The whispers grew louder as the days wore on, the voices of the dead, and they were starting to bleed into the waking world. Clara could hear them even when she wasn't asleep, murmuring, calling her name, speaking of things they shouldn't know. She tried to stay focused. She had to. She needed answers. The truth of what was happening to her, to the others, it was just beyond her grasp. But she had no idea that what would come next would tear her world apart. That evening, after the usual meal of soup, Clara went to bed, the taste of it still clinging to her tongue. She lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. The soup wasn't just feeding them, it was changing them. She could feel it in every part of her body, as if the man from her dreams was inside her too, breathing with her, thinking with her. Suddenly she heard the sound of footsteps in the hall. She wasn't sure whether she was dreaming or awake, but she couldn't ignore it. She crept out of bed, her bare feet making no sound on the cold floor, and snuck into the hallway. To her horror, she saw the other children, all of them, Thomas, Eva, Samuel, standing in a circle in the middle of the hallway, their faces blank, their eyes unfocused. They were staring at something, at nothing. The whispers were louder now, rising from their lips as they muttered in unison, speaking the same words. The words were unfamiliar, but Clara understood them anyway. They understood them. The man's voice again, low and haunting, echoed in her mind. "They've all eaten my flesh. They are mine now." Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was happening to all of them now. They were losing themselves just like Samuel. The more they ate, the more they were becoming them. The dead, the spirits, the memories of those who had once lived here in the orphanage long before. Clara was paralyzed by fear, unsure of what to do. But as she watched the children, her friends, her family, she realized they weren't even aware of what was happening. They were lost, gone. They were nothing more than vessels, channels for the souls of the dead. She was losing them, one by one, and what terrified her the most was the creeping realization that she was next. She could stay in the hallway, trapped in this waking nightmare. Clara ran back to her room, her heartbeat thudding in her chest, but she couldn't escape the voices. The more she tried to block them out, the louder they became, and soon she was suffocating under their weight. Eat, feed, become. You are one of us. The whispers seemed to come from all around her, as though the walls themselves were alive with them. It was too much. The hunger clawed at her insides, demanding to be fed. Clara snapped. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to know more. In a daze, she stumbled to the kitchen, her hands trembling as she reached for the ladle. The soup was still warm, its thick, meaty scent filling the air. The hunger, the need, overwhelmed her. She poured the soup into a bowl and lifted it to her lips, but something stopped her. A voice, a whisper so loud it drowned everything else. "You know what this is, Clara. You know what you're becoming." The voice was her own. Or was it? It felt like someone else speaking through her, urging her on, pushing her to take the next step into madness. But she couldn't stop. She had to know. The moment the soup touched her lips, her vision blurred. The room spun, and suddenly she was no longer in the orphanage. She was standing in the middle of a battlefield. Blood splattered on her hands, the stench of death in the air. She could feel the pain, the desperation of the man who had died there, a soldier in another life, in another time. Clara tried to pull away, but she couldn't. She was there, in his body, living his final moments. She screamed in terror, but the scream was swallowed by the deafening roar of battle. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the orphanage. The bowl of soup had fallen from her hands, splashing onto the floor. Her body was shaking uncontrollably. The man's memories were still in her head, gnawing at her thoughts. But it didn't end there. In the corner of the room, Sister Magdalena stood, watching her with cold eyes. Clara's breath caught in her throat. How long had she been there? Sister Magdalena stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You've taken the first step," she said softly. "You've tasted what you were meant to." Clara backed away, her mind racing. "What did you do to us? What is the soup?" Sister Magdalena's smile was like ice. "It's not just food, child. It's life. It's the key to everything, to eternity. You've consumed the past, and now the past consumes you." Clara's body trembled. The man's memories, his pain, were inside her now. And the worst part, she couldn't escape it. She'd become a part of the curse. The truth was beginning to unfold before Clara's eyes, but each answer only led to more questions. The man's memories still clung to her like a shroud, his death, his life, his pain of it seeping into her very soul. She could feel him inside her, and though she tried to fight it, she knew he had taken root. She wasn't just Clara anymore, she was becoming him. But that wasn't all. Clara wasn't the only one changing. As the days passed, the other children started to show signs of the same possession. Samuel no longer spoke in the quiet tones they were used to. His voice had deepened, his words sharp with an accent from a place and time none of them had ever visited. He told stories of distant lands, of battles fought long ago, of kings and queens. His eye-stows were different now too. The light in them was gone, replaced by something darker, something older. The soup, that cursed soup, had changed them all. They ate, and the more they consumed, the more the souls of the dead seeped into their bodies. It wasn't just a transformation, it was possession. The children weren't just taking in the memories of the dead, they were becoming the dead. Clara watched helplessly as Thomas, the oldest of the orphans, began to act in ways that terrified her. The once quiet and reserved boy now spoke with the fervor of a preacher. He would stand in the middle of the room, his arms raised as if he were giving a sermon, his voice booming with words that were not his own. It was as if some ancient spirit had taken over his body, using it to speak through him. But the worst part was what happened next. One evening, as Clara sat in the corner of the orphanage's main room, the others gathered around, listening intently to Thomas' latest sermon. He spoke of death, of the afterlife, of eternal souls bound to the land. His words, so vivid, so powerful, began to pull Clara into a trance. She couldn't look away, couldn't tear herself from the hypnotic rhythm of his speech. She was drawn to it like she was being pulled into the very words he was speaking. That's when she heard "it" sound of whispers again. But this time, it wasn't just in her head. The whispers were all around her, a chorus of voices calling out in a language she couldn't understand. The air grew thick, heavy, as though the very walls of the orphanage were alive, pulsing with the memories of the dead. "Clara," the voices hissed, "you belong to us now." She stood, her body trembling, unable to control the force pulling her toward the center of the room where Thomas stood. The children watched in silence, their eyes empty, their faces hollow. It was as though they were no longer truly alive, but vessels for something much older, much darker. And then, Clara's world turned upside down. The whispers grew louder, and the room seemed to spin. She staggered forward, her feet moving on their own. She was no longer in control. The man, the soldier whose memories had claimed her, had taken full hold of her. She could feel his thoughts swirling inside her mind, his desires, his hatred. It wasn't just him anymore. It was a part of her now, consuming her from the inside. Suddenly, Clara's vision blurred, and she found herself back on the battlefield. Blood was everywhere staining the ground. Beneath her feet, she could hear the screams of soldiers dying all around her, the clash of metal, the cries of the wounded, and there, standing amidst the carnage, was the man whose memory she had consumed her soldier. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that instant, Clara felt something shift. It wasn't just his pain she was feeling, it was his rage. The rage of a man trapped in the endless cycle of violence, never able to escape. Her vision snapped back to the orphanage, and she realized with horror that she was no longer just a witness to the memories of the dead. She had become them. The man's rage was inside her, fighting to get out. "Clara," Thomas' voice boomed, snapping her out of her trance. His eyes were wild now, his expression almost manic. "The land is calling to us. We are the chosen." Clara could see it now, what had been happening to the children. They weren't just becoming the dead, they were being called by the land itself. The orphanage was built on ancient, cursed ground. The souls that had died there, the souls that had been fed to them, were not just trapped, they were feeding on the children, turning them into something that could never escape. The soup wasn't just a ritual, it was a means of drawing them into the curse. It was the land's way of keeping them here forever, but there was more. As the truth dawned on Clara, something shifted in her. The man's memories' rage, his bitterness awoke inside her. She was no longer just the vessel of his pain. She was the vessel of all the spirits trapped in the orphanage. And in that moment, she realized something even more horrifying. The children weren't just vessels for the dead, they were becoming them. They were slowly, inevitably, losing their identities to the curse of the land. The land had claimed them, and the more they ate, the deeper they were pulled into its grasp. But Clara wasn't done. She wouldn't let the land take her, not yet. She turned toward Sister Magdalena, standing silently in the doorway, her face unreadable. It was clear that the woman knew everything. She had orchestrated this from the start, feeding the children the souls of the dead, drawing them deeper into the land's curse. The question was, why? What was her end game? What did she hope to gain from all this? Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She had to stop this. She had to stop herself from becoming a permanent part of this cycle of death, and she was going to make sure the others didn't fall as she had. Clara's mind was unraveling. The whispers, those damned whispers, refused to leave her. No matter how hard she tried to push them away, they grew louder, more insistent. They were inside her head now, in her soul, and every moment she spent in the orphanage seemed to push her deeper into their grasp. The land, the soup, the curse, they were all linked. And Clara was no longer sure where the curse ended, and she began. After the last confrontation with Thomas, something had snapped inside Clara. She could feel it, a shift, a hunger that was no longer just a man's memory, no. It was something darker, something older. She wasn't just haunted by the soldier. She was haunted by the souls of the dead who had been fed to her. Each night, they clamored for control. Each moment, she felt herself slipping further away from who she was, from Clara, and becoming a part of the land's dark cycle. But the worst part? Clara realized she wasn't alone in this. The other children had already begun to lose themselves completely. Samuel, once so quiet, had taken on the persona of a long-dead warlord, his actions violent, his speech grandiose. His eyes, once warm, now burned with a ruthless ambition. He wasn't Samuel anymore. He was the warlord, living and breathing through Samuel's body. And Thomas had gone too far. He no longer spoke of salvation or redemption. His words were now dark incantations, muttered in languages that had no place in this world. He wasn't just possessed. He had become the spirits he was channeling, and the more he spoke, the more those spirits claimed him. Clara couldn't bear it. She had to do something before she was lost entirely. She had to stop the cycle, or they would all be condemned forever. But the question, Washo? The answer came to her in a single, horrifying moment. It was late one night, after the children had eaten, that Clara found herself standing in front of the same bowl of soup that had begun her descent, the same soup that had consumed them all. She stared at it, her body trembling as the man's memories pulsed in her veins. The soldier, the warlord, the poet, they were all inside her now. She could feel their pain, their desires, their rage. She could feel the land calling to her, pulling her closer to its grasp. Clara's hand reached for the ladle, her fingers trembling. The temptation to take another potato, become whole again, to understand what she was becoming, was overwhelming. She was starving for it. But deep inside her, a voice screamed, a voice that wasn't the soldiers or the warlords or even her own. "Stop," it whispered. She pulled her hand back, startled. The voice was her own, but not quite. It was a memory, one she hadn't known she had. A distant memory, buried deep inside. The whispers were fading, and Clara felt something stir within her. She wasn't lost yet. She wasn't gone. Clara's resolve hardened. She had to break the curse, and the only way to do that was to confront Sister Magdalena. The nun, as always, was a silent presence in the background, watching. Clara found her standing in the far corner of the room, her eyes glinting coldly. It was as though the woman had been waiting for this moment. Clara knew instinctively that Sister Magdalena had known the children would fight back eventually. She had been preparing for this. She had known they would resist. "You can't stop it," Sister Magdalena said, her voice soft yet chilling. "You never could. The land has claimed you all. You were always meant to be part of it." Clara stepped forward, her fists clenched at her sides. "What do you mean? What is this place? What have you done to us?" Sister Magdalena's lips curled into a smile that made Clara's blood run cold. "This orphanage isn't just a home for lost children. It's a sanctuary for the dead. It's built on cursed land, land that feeds on the souls of those who die on it. When I found you, when I took you in, I knew what you were. You were chosen to feed it, to become a part of it. The soup isn't just food, it's a vessel. It carries the souls of the dead, and you are feeding them, feeding me. It was always meant to be this way." Clara recoiled, the weight of the truth sinking in. The orphanage wasn't just a place of refuge. It was a prison for the souls that had been trapped here, bound to the land by the curse. And the soup? The soup wasn't just feeding them, it was sustaining the curse. Every time the children ate, the land grew stronger, and the spirits grew more powerful. "No," Clara whispered. "You are lying." "I'm not," Sister Magdalena said, her voice softening. "I have given you everything, child. I have given you the power to live forever, to never die. But now you want to escape. You think you can fight it, but you can't. The land will not let you." Clara felt the panic rise within her. There was no escape, no way to fight this. Sister Magdalena was right. The land had claimed them. It had claimed her. And as long as they ate the soup, as long as they were part of this cycle, they would never be free. They would never be themselves again. But something inside Clara snapped. She wasn't going to give up, not yet. She couldn't. In that moment, Clara realized the truth. It wasn't just the soup that had been keeping them trapped, it was the land itself. And it wasn't just feeding off them, it was drawing them in, turning them into part of the curse. The land wasn't a levite, was a parasite, feeding off their misery, their souls. The more they gave, the more it took. But Clara wasn't done. She couldn't let this be the end. She had to stop the cycle. If she couldn't escape, she would destroy the thing that had created it, all the soup, the land, the curse. She would burn it to the ground. With a burst of adrenaline, Clara ran. She wasn't going to let Sister Magdalena or the land win. She didn't know how yet, but she would find a way. Clara's mind was a battleground. The voices of the dead, once whispers, now screamed at her from all sides, clawing at her consciousness. With every step she took, every breath she drew, the memories of the warlord, the poet, the soldier, they surged through her, pushing her further from herself. The man's death that had once haunted her now seemed like a distant echo, lost among the millions of lives and voices she had absorbed. She was no longer just Clara. She was everyone. She was no one. The more she fought to retain herself, the stronger the pull of the soup became. The more she resisted, the more the spirits fought back. It wasn't just a meal. It wasn't just food. It was a curse, a vessel, to trap the souls of the dead, and Clara was its newest host. The land's hunger was insatiable, and every bowl of soup they ate only made it stronger. It wasn't just feeding them. It was feeding on them. But there was no turning back now. Clara had made the decision. She had to destroy the curse or become part of it forever. The land, the orphanage, the soup, it all had to end. She couldn't do it alone, though. The others, the children, had to be freed from their own psychic prisons. She wasn't the only one trapped in this nightmare. Samuel, Thomas, and the others were already lost to the spirits inside them. But maybe, just maybe, she could reach them before it was too late. Clara's plan was simple in its desperation. She had to destroy the soup, destroy the source of their possession. She had to take away the one thing that bound them to the land. But where to begin? Her thoughts were clouded, swirling with 1,000 different voices, each one trying to take control. But one thought remained clear: Sister Magdalena. The nun was the key to everything. She had orchestrated this. She had known all along. It was time to confront her. Clara made her way through the darkened halls, her feet barely making a sound against the cold stone floor. The orphanage felt different. The air was thick with dread, like the very walls were watching her, listening. The whispers were louder now, seeping into her skin, burrowing into her mind. She had no choice but to push forward. When she reached the kitchen, where the soup had been made, the door creaked open on its own. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering light of a single candle. In the center of the room, Sister Magdalena stood, her back turned to Clara as she stirred the last of the soup in the pot. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, but she steadied herself. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had come too far to turn back. "You knew," Clara said, her voice sharp in the silence. "You knew what the soup was doing. You knew what it would do to us." Sister Magdalena didn't turn around. She simply continued stirring, her voice cold and distant. "Of course I knew. I created this. The land chose you, just as it chose all the others. You were meant to be part of the cycle." Clara stepped forward, her fists clenched at her sides. "What is this place? What is this curse? Why are you doing this?" Sister Magdalena finally turned, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "This land has been hungry for centuries, child. It feeds on the souls of the lost, the forgotten. This orphanage was built on ancient cursed ground. Those who die here don't leave. They stay trapped by the land's power, bound to it. The soup is merely a vessel. It draws the souls in, feeding them to the children, turning them into vessels for the dead. And once you've consumed enough, you become one of them. You become part of the land." Clara's stomach churned. She had been right. The soup wasn't just nourishment, it was a trap. Every bite they took, every memory they consumed was. Another step closer to losing themselves forever. "You can't stop it," Sister Magdalena continued, her voice growing colder. "You're already part of it. You always have been. The land has claimed you." "No," Clara said, her voice firm. "I'm not a part of this. I won't be. I won't let you trap me in this endless cycle. It'll destroy it." Sister Magdalena's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You don't understand, child. You think you can fight the land, but it's too late for you. It's too late for all of you. You've already eaten my flesh, and now you belong to me. You belong to the land." Clara's heart raced, but she refused to back down. "I won't let you keep us. I won't let the land win." Before Sister Magdalena could stop her, Clara grabbed the ladle and poured the last of the soup into a bowl. Her hands shook as she lifted it to her lips, but just as she was about to take a bite, something inside her screamed. It was the man's voice against Soldier, the warlord, the poet, but this time, it wasn't just one of them, it was all of them. "Don't," the voices whispered. "Don't become us. Don't give in." Clara paused, the bowl still in her hands. For a moment she thought she might collapse under the weight of their presence, but then she felt something different, something strong, something her own. The whispers faded into the background as Clara took control of her mind, her body. The spirits couldn't have her. Not yet. With a fierce cry, Clara threw the bowl of soup across the room, shattering it against the stone wall. The moment the soup hit the ground, a deafening roar filled the room. The walls seemed to shake, the very floor beneath her feet trembling. The ground was fighting back, trying to pull her into its grip. But Clara wasn't done. She wasn't going to let it end like this. She didn't know how, but she had to break the curse. The soup had been the key, but not anymore. She had destroyed it, and now she would destroy the land's hold over them once and for all. Clara turned to face Sister Magdalena, who had fallen silent. The nun's face was now twisted with fury, but Clara didn't care. She was going to end this, even if it meant giving everything. "Do you think you can fight me?" Sister Magdalena hissed. "You've already lost." Clara took a deep breath. "I haven't lost yet." With a scream, she lunged at the nun, knocking her backwards. The room exploded with light-blinding, searing light. The walls began to crack and splinter, and for a moment Clara thought she might die in that moment. But something else happened, something unexpected. The light pulled at the land itself. It wasn't just the soup that had been keeping the curse alive, it was the land itself, feeding off their pain, their memories. Clara's sacrifice was breaking its hold, and with one final surge of energy, the land began to crumble. The walls cracked, the floor gave way, and the earth beneath them trembled violently. As the last of the light surged through the room, Clara collapsed to the ground, the darkness closing in around her. But before it consumed her, she knew one thing. The cycle had been broken. The curse had been lifted. Clara's vision blurred as the dust settled around her. The land, once alive with the power of the curse, now seemed to groan in pain, as if it were dying, fighting for its life. The orphanage was falling apart, its walls collapsing into the earth. The air was thick with the scent of charred wood, the ground shaking beneath her feet. She should have felt relief. She had broken the cycle, destroyed the soup, and shattered the land's hold over them. But as the dust cloud settled and she lay on the floor, her body aching from the fall, there was no sense of peace. The voices still echoed in her mind. The soldier, the poet, the warlord, they were still there, lingering in the corners of her thoughts, gnawing at her sense of self. Clara slowly pushed herself to her knees, her fingers brushing against the cracked stone floor. She didn't know how much time had passed, but the air still felt heavy with the remnants of the curse. She could feel the weight of the dead pressing down on her, like they were trying to pull her back into the darkness. But Clara wouldn't go back. She couldn't. She stood shakily, her legs trembling beneath her, and scanned the room. The orphanage had collapsed around her, the once strong walls now reduced to rubble. The remains of the soup, the bowl she had shattered, lay scattered across the floor. The echoes of the land's power were fading, but she could still feel it, the faintest whisper, like the memory of a nightmare you could never escape. And then she saw them. The other children lay scattered around the room. Samuel, Thomas, all of them, their bodies twisted and contorted, their eyes wide and vacant. They were dead. The land had taken them, consumed them, and now they were nothing more than empty shells. Clara's heart sank. She had saved herself, but she couldn't save them. They had already been claimed by the curse, consumed by the spirits they had swallowed with every spoonful of soup. They were lost forever. But then something strange happened. A soft whisper filled the air, not the usual haunting murmur she had grown accustomed to, but something different. A voice her own called out to her, Clara, her name. It wasn't just in her mind, it was in the air, surrounding her, coming from every corner of the room. Clara's pulse quickened. What? Who's there? She whispered, her voice trembling. The whisper returned, clearer now, more distinct. You are not alone. You were never meant to be alone. The ground beneath her shifted as though the earth itself was alive. Clara stumbled backward, her heart racing. Was this the land? Was it trying to claim her again? But the voice that filled her mind was different. It wasn't one of the spirits she had absorbed. It was something else, something older, more powerful. Who are you? Clara demanded, her voice barely a whisper. The walls of the orphanage groaned, the remnants of the land's energy pulsing beneath her feet. And then, as if the earth itself was speaking, the voice answered, I am the land. Clara froze. The land? The very thing she had fought against, the thing that had tried to consume her, was speaking to her. You are the land? Clara said, disbelief in her voice. How is that possible? The voice chuckled softly, but there was no humor in eye-tonely darkness. The land is not just soil and stone, child. The land is power, history, memory. It is the souls of the forgotten, the lost. It is the hunger that feeds on all who enter. And now, it has fed on you. Clara's stomach churned. Two destroyed the soup. I broke the curse. The land it's not in control anymore. You think the soup was the curse? The voice seemed to laugh again, though it was colder now, darker. The soup was merely a channel, a means to an end. The true curse was always the land itself. It feeds on souls, binds them, traps them here, but it also gives. It gives power to live forever, to become part of it. That was your destiny, Clara. You have always been part of it. Clara's mind reeled. She had always known the land was hungry, but she never realized how deep its roots went, how much it controlled, how much it had already consumed. And she had been one of the chosen. She had been part of the land cycle, a tool in its endless hunger. No, Clara whispered, shaking her head. I won't be a part of this. I won't let the land take me. But the voice responded, its tone even darker now. You already are, Clara. You have already given yourself to it. You cannot escape. You have consumed the past, and now the past consumes you. Clara's pulse hammered in her ears as she tried to fight back the pull of the land. She had come so far, fought so hard, but the weight of the land's power was too much. She could feel it inside her, the land's memories mixing with her own, trying to erase her. The soldier's rage, the warlord's ambition, the poet's sorrow. They weren't her memories anymore. They were the land's, and they were consuming her. But then, just as she felt herself slipping away, a flicker of light caught her eye. It wasn't the land's power. It was something else her power. A memory surfaced, one she had buried deep inside herself. A memory of her life before the orphanage, before the land had claimed her. She had been a child, full of life, full of hope. She remembered her family, her mother, her father. The land had tried to bury that part of her, erase it, but Clara remembered. She wasn't just the land's vessel. She was herself. With a strength she didn't know she had, Clara pushed back against the land's pull, using every ounce of her will to hold on to her identity. The land screamed in fury, but Clara fought back, channeling the memories of her own life, her own soul, into one final act of defiance. The ground trembled as the land fought to reclaim her, but Clara stood firm. "I am me," she whispered, her voice growing stronger. "I am Clara." The voice of the land grew silent, and for a moment Clara thought she had won. But then, a new voice filled the air, a voice that was familiar, but not hers. "Clara." It was Samuel. Clara turned to see him standing in the doorway, his eyes no longer vacant, his expression filled with something she hadn't seen in him for days, clarity. And behind him stood the other children, their eyes wide with recognition. "We're not lost," Samuel said softly. "We're here." Clara's heart skipped a beat. The curse hadn't claimed them all. Some of them had fought back just as she had. Together they had a chance. Clara could hardly believe what she was seeing. The children, her children, were standing before her, their eyes filled with clarity. They were free. For a moment she thought she had imagined it. She had fought so hard to break the land's hold, and now, just when she thought the nightmare was over, the truth hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. Samuel, standing at the front, took a step toward her, his eyes no longer clouded by the spirits that had overtaken him. "Clara," he whispered, "we're not lost anymore." Clara swallowed hard. She wanted to run to them, to embrace them, but something in the back of her mind stopped her. The land had tried to claim them all, but it had only succeeded in part. Some had resisted, just like she had. "But how? What happened?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't the soup that saved us," Samuel said, his voice trembling slightly. "It was you. You broke the cycle. The land couldn't control us. After you destroyed the soup. But it still had a hold on our memories, on our identities." Clara's heart sank. She had thought destroying the soup would be enough, but the truth was far worse than she imagined. The land had more power than she had realized. Even without the soup, it managed to hold on to the children's memories, their very selves. "We weren't fully free," Samuel continued, his voice growing steadier. "But when we saw you fight, when we saw you resist, it was like something clicked. We remembered who we were, who we used to be." Clara felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. The children were free, but at what cost? The land had left its mark on them, and that mark would never fade. But there was no time to dwell on that now. Sister Magdalena was still out there. She was still a threat, and Clara knew that she had to face her. The land's power had been broken, but only for now. The cycle could start again at any moment, and Sister Magdalena would do everything in her power to bring it back. The children gathered around Clara, their faces filled with determination. They were ready to fight, and so was Clara. Together, they made their way to the heart of the orphanage, where Sister Magdalena had always been. The walls seemed to pulse with the last remnants of the curse, the air thick with the oppressive weight of the land's dark power. Clara could feel it in her bones, but this time, she wasn't afraid. She had already faced the worst it could offer. When they reached the center of the orphanage, Sister Magdalena was waiting. She stood in the middle of the room, her back turned to them, as if she had known they were coming. There was a quiet confidence in her posture, a calmness that unsettled Clara. "So," Sister Magdalena said, her voice cold as ice, "you think you've won?" Clara stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's over, Magdalena. You can't control us anymore. The land doesn't have a hold on us. We're free." The nun slowly turned to face her, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Free?" she repeated, her eyes flashing with a dangerous glint. "You think you're free, but the land doesn't give up so easily. It's never over. It can't be." Clara's breath caught in her throat as a realization hit her with the force of a lightning strike. The land hadn't just been using the soup to feed on them. It wasn't just a place of death and suffering. No, the land had been trying to create something. It had been using them to build an army. Sister Magdalena's smile widened as if she could hear Clara's thoughts. "I'm not trying to control you anymore. I don't need to. You are part of the land now, all of you." Clara's stomach dropped. She had thought they had broken the cycle, but the truth was far darker. The land wasn't interested in domination anymore. It didn't need to trap them in endless loops. It needed them to join it. The land wanted to merge with them, to become them. "You've eaten from the land's soul," Sister Magdalena continued. "You've consumed its memories, its power. Now, you are the land. You are its new vessels, its new guardians." Clara took a step back, her mind reeling. She felt it then, that familiar pull of the land calling to her, calling to all of them. It wasn't the land's power trying to consume them. It was offering them a place within it, a place of immortality, a place where they could live forever. But at what cost? "We are not your guardians," Clara said, her voice firm though her hands shook. "We are not your vessels. We will never be part of this." Sister Magdalena's eyes glinted with malice. "You have no choice, Clara. You can't escape the land. It's inside you. It always will be." The ground beneath them trembled again, as if the land itself were rejecting Clara's defiance. The air grew thick, the walls shaking as the last remnants of the curse rose up to fight back. But then, something unexpected happened. The children, the ones who had once been lost to the land's grip, stepped forward. Samuel, Thomas, Eve, all of them. Together, they stood beside Clara, their eyes burning with determination. "No," Samuel said, his voice strong. "We can fight this. We are not the land. We are us." Clara felt the strength of their resolve surge through her. She wasn't alone anymore. She had never been alone. They were all connected, not just by the curse, but by their will to fight. Sister Magdalena's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "You think you can fight the land? You think you can escape your fate?" Clara didn't answer. She didn't need to. She had already made up her mind. With one last burst of energy, she reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the ground beneath her. She felt the land's power pulse through her, but this time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't being consumed. She was taking back control. As Clara focused all of her willpower, the land itself seemed to scream in protest. The walls cracked, the floor buckled, and with one final deafening roar, the land shattered. The curse that had held them all in its grip for so long crumbled to dust. Sister Magdalena let out a shriek of rage, but it was too late. The land had been broken. The cycle had ended. Clara stood, trembling but triumphant. The curse was gone. The land was silent. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt free. The land was silent. For the first time since Clara had arrived at the orphanage, there was no whispering in the air, no oppressive pull on her soul. The curse had been shattered, the cycles broken. The walls around them were nothing more than rubble now. Sister Magdalena had vanished, consumed by the very land she had worshipped. But even as Clara and the others stood in the wreckage, they could still feel something that lingered, something that had never truly let go. It was like the land was waiting for them to forget, waiting for them to let down their guard. Clara's body still ached with the residue of the curse. She felt it in her bones, the weight of the dead inside her, their memories, clawing at her consciousness. It was almost like they were still there, just beneath the surface, whispering, urging her to let go. But Clara wouldn't let them win. "Clara," Samuel said softly, his voice distant as he approached her. "We're free. We've done it. It's over." Clara looked at him, his face pale, but the clarity in his eyes undeniable. "It's not over," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not yet." Thomas and Eva stood behind him, their eyes still haunted by the memories of the spirits they had absorbed. But there was a flicker of hope in their gaze now, something they hadn't had before. They weren't fully free not yet, but they were starting to come back. Clara knew that they weren't truly free until they could finally let go of the land's hold on them. She had fought against it, yes, but the memory-esque voices, they were still with her, deep within her. "I can feel them," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "The land, it's inside me. I don't think I can ever be rid of it." Samuel stepped forward, his face sympathetic. "We can fight it together. We've already done the impossible. We broke the cycle, and now we have each other." Clara looked at him, at all of them. She knew that he was right, but there was still a heavy weight on her chest, a gnawing fear. The land hadn't just taken their identities, it had given them something in return. Power, immortality. They could never forget that part of themselves. Could they really move on? Could they leave the land behind? Or would they always be tethered to it? A sudden gust of wind howled through the ruined orphanage, rattling the remnants of the walls, and Clara's heart skipped. There was a crackling sound in the air, like electricity buzzing in the atmosphere. Something was wrong. The ground beneath them began to tremble again, not with the power of the curse this time, but with something else, something new. Clara's eyes widened as the earth split open before them, revealing a dark, gaping chasm beneath the orphanage. "No!" Clara gasped, stumbling back. The others stared, paralyzed, as shadows began to rise from the chasm. Figures, hazy and indistinct, floated up from the depths. They weren't human. They were something else's something, born from the land's power, something beyond the dead souls they had absorbed. "This isn't over," a voice echoed from the chasm. It was low and gravelly, a voice Clara recognized all too well. It was the voice of Sister Magdalena. Clara stepped forward, her heart pounding. "You're still here. How I told you," the voice hissed. "You can never escape the land. You can never escape me." From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was Sister Magdalena, or what was left of her. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale and cracked like stone, and her form flickered like a fading shadow. She had become part of the land itself, a twisted amalgamation of what she had once been and the land's power. But there was something new about her, something more dangerous. "You became part of the land," Clara whispered, horrified. "You are the land." Sister Magdalena's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Yes, child, and now I own it. The land is mine, and so are you." The ground trembled again, but this time it was different. The air grew thick, the space between them crackling with dark energy. The land was fighting to reclaim them, fighting to pull them back into the cycle of possession. The earth itself seemed to reach for them, its fingers made of stone and bone, and the memories of the dead began to resurface, threatening to overwhelm them. Clara felt the pull in her chest, the oppressive weight of the land's power calling to her once more. It wanted her. It wanted all of them, and if they weren't careful, they would be dragged back into its grasp. But Clara wasn't the same person she had been. She had fought the curse. She had fought for herself, for her freedom. And now she would fight again. "We're not part of this anymore," Clara said firmly, stepping forward with resolve. "We are not the land. We are us, and we're going to stay that way." Clara reached out, grabbing Samuel's hand, then Eva's, then Thomas. The others joined her, standing together as one. They were not the land. They were not the curse. They were human, and that was enough. With one final defiant scream, Clara thrust her hand toward the chasm. The earth beneath them trembled with fury, but this time, Clara's will was stronger. The land fought back, but it couldn't win out anymore. The power of the land, the curse, the cycle began to collapse in on itself. The shadows screamed as they were pulled back into the chasm, and Sister Magdalena's twisted form flickered one last time before disappearing into the darkness. The ground was still, silent. Clara's breathing slowed as the tension finally broke. It was over. The curse was shattered once and for all. The land no longer called to them. "We're free," Samuel said quietly, his voice full of awe. Clara nodded, her heart finally at peace. For the first time, she felt the weight of the land's hold slip away, like the last remnants of a nightmare fading into the dawn. But as Clara looked around, she realized something. The orphanage was gone. The land that had held them captive had been destroyed, and with it, the children who had once been trapped were now free to live, truly live. They weren't just freed from the land, they were freed from the curse, and from themselves. The world was still, the echoes of the land's fury fading into silence. The orphanage was gone, crumbled into nothingness, swallowed by the very earth it had been built on. The curse had been broken, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Something had shifted. She stood in the remains of the orphanage, her breath steady but her heart pounding. The children, her children, stood with her, each one still processing the freedom they had gained. They weren't just free from the land. They were free from the curse that had haunted them for so long. But Clara couldn't stop thinking about the one thing that had always remained constant throughout their journey. Sister Magdalena, the nun, the architect of their suffering, had been defeated. But in that moment, Clara couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Sister Magdalena's influence hadn't been entirely erased. It was as if a part of her lingered in the very air they breathed. "Clara," Samuel said, his voice full of uncertainty, "it's over. The curse is gone. We're free." Clara looked at him and then at the others, Seva, Thomas, and the rest. They were all free, but why did it still feel like something was missing? Clara opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a low, eerie hum filled the air. The ground beneath their feet trembled, as if something were stirring beneath the ruins of the orphanage. The air grew thick, charged with an electric energy, and Clara felt her stomach drop. "Not again," she whispered. And then she saw Itan unnatural darkness rising from the very center of the rubble. The shadows twisted and writhed, forming shapes, figures. Clara could see them now, shadows of people, faces she recognized, the spirits of the dead, the ones who had once inhabited the orphanage. "Clara," a voice called from the darkness. It was a voice she knew all too well. It was Sister Magdalena. The ground cracked open, and from the depths, the nun's form emerged, her body gaunt and twisted, her eyes glowing with a sickly light. Her face was cracked, like the earth itself had birthed her, but her presence was unmistakable. She had returned. "No," Clara whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I broke the curse. You can't come back." Sister Magdalena's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You think you can destroy me? You think you can break the land's power? You are the land now, Clara. We are the land." Clara's heart sank as the full weight of the realization hit her. The land hadn't been completely destroyed. The curse hadn't just bound the children to the land, it had merged them with it. The land was alive, a force beyond their comprehension. And in breaking the curse, Clara hadn't freed herself, and the other she had only freed the spirit of the land itself, a spirit that was now entwined with their very souls. "No!" Clara cried out, stepping back, but the darkness closed in on her. The spirits of the orphanage reached for her, their hands cold and insistent, pulling her toward the chasm that had opened beneath them. "You can't escape, Clara," Sister Magdalena said, her voice echoing with power. "You were always meant to be part of this. The land is inside you. You are the land." Clara's mind raced. She had destroyed the soup. She had confronted the land. She had broken the cycle, or so she thought. But now, as the shadows closed in, she realized the truth. She had never truly broken the cycle at all. The land had tricked her. It had fed on her, used her. She had never been free. It had only allowed her to think she was. "No," Clara whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I'm not part of you. I'm not them." Suddenly, she remembered something, the final piece of the puzzle. The land wasn't just a curse. It was a symbiosis. The land fed on souls, but it also gave them something in return: immortality, power, control, but only if you accepted it, if you became a vessel. Clara's hands clenched into fists as the realization struck her. She had to take control. She had to rewrite the ending, for herself and for the others. The land was inside Harry's, but it was not her. She wasn't the land's prisoner. She was Clara, and the land had no hold over her anymore. With a cry of defiance, Clara reached deep within herself, calling upon the strength she had found in her struggle, the will to fight for her freedom, for themselves. The power of the land, the curse, the spirits all flooded into her at once. But Clara did not falter. She focused. "I reject you," she whispered louder this time. "I reject the land." The darkness shrieked in fury, but Clara stood firm. She was no longer the land's pawn. She had broken its power once, and she would do it again. The earth beneath her feet trembled violently, as if protesting her defiance. Sister Magdalena's form began to flicker, her eyes wild with rage. "You can't defeat me," she hissed. "We are one. We were never one," Clara said, her voice gaining strength. "I am me, and you are nothing." With one final mighty push, Clara reached into the depths of her own soul, calling upon everything she had left. The land fought her, pulling, twisting, trying to swallow her once more. But Clara's will was stronger. She tore the land's hold from her soul, casting it into the abyss below. The darkness began to collapse in on itself, disintegrating as the land's power was finally broken. Sister Magdalena's form disintegrated, fading into the shadows from which it had come. The spirits of the orphanage screamed in agony as they were pulled into the chasm. The land's grasp finally loosened. Clara collapsed to her knees, exhausted but victorious. The whispers were gone. The land was silent. And for the first time, she felt completely free. The others gathered around her, their faces still haunted, but their eyes clear, their minds free. The cycle was truly broken. The land was no longer inside them. They were no longer its prisoners. Clara looked up at the sky, feeling the cool breeze on her skin. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe freely. She had won. She had broken the cycle. And this time, it was over for good. The sun broke through the clouds, casting its light over the remnants of the orphanage. Clara stood amidst the ruins, the ground still trembling beneath her feet. It was over. The curse was shattered. Sister Magdalena was gone, consumed by the very land she had tried to control. The spirits of the past, trapped for so long, had been freed. The land was silent, at last. Clara had done it. She had broken the cycle, freed the children, and destroyed the land's hold over them. But something was still nagging at the back of her mind. Despite the victory, despite the relief, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air around her seemed too still. It was as if the land was holding its breath, waiting for something. "Clara," Samuel said, his voice soft but firm, pulling her from her thoughts. "It's done. We're free." Clara turned to face him, and the others gathered behind him. Thomas, Eva, and the rest of the children stood tall, their faces still haunted, but their eyes were clear. They had been through so much, had suffered so much, and now they were free. Clara felt a wave of love and gratitude for them wash over her. They had been lost, but now they were free to rebuild their lives. But the nagging feeling remained. Clara glanced around, her eyes scanning the horizon. The landscape, once full of oppressive, stifling energy, was now peaceful. The earth no longer groaned with dark power. There was no more whispering, no more calling. Everything was quiet, almost too quiet. Then something caught Clara's eye, a shadow moving across the ground. It was subtle at first, but Clara's senses, sharpened by her ordeal, were keen. The shadow didn't belong. It moved too swiftly, too erratically, like a cloud passing too quickly across the sky. She froze. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. "What is it?" Eva asked, her voice trembling. Clara shook her head, her heart pounding. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them shook again. Stronger this time. The earth cracked open, and from the fissure, an unnatural darkness began to rise. A familiar, suffocating energy filled the air, and Clara's blood ran cold. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." From the depths of the chasm, a figure emerged. At first, Clara thought it was just a shadow, but as it rose higher, her breath caught in her throat. It was Sister Magdalena, but not in the way she had seen her before. This wasn't the broken, decaying form she had fought. This was something else entirely. This was something worse. Sister Magdalena was no longer just a twisted remnant of a woman. She had become the land. Her eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, and her body was no longer human. She was a mass of shifting shadows, a dark, almost spectral being stretching across the sky. Clara stepped back, her heart racing. "This isn't possible. You died. You were destroyed." Sister Magdalena's voice echoed through the air, distorted and otherworldly. "You think you've broken the cycle, Clara? You think you've destroyed me? You've only delayed the inevitable." Clara's chest tightened. "What are you talking about? You're gone. The land is free." Sister Magdalena's laugh was chilling, a low, reverberating sound that filled the very air. "You've freed the land, yes, but the land is not just a place. It is a force. It does not die. It does not fade. It adapts." Clara shook her head, her mind racing. "What do you mean?" Sister Magdalena's figure flickered and twisted. "I have become the land. Clara, my soul is bound to it. You freed me from my prison, but you can never rid yourself of the curse. You are part of it now, just like the others. It is in your blood. It is in your soul." "No," Clara said, her voice cracking with fear. "I am not part of you. I am me. You can't control me. You can't control any of us." Sister Magdalena's form twisted again, growing larger, more powerful. "You are already part of it. You cannot escape. You are bound to the land as I was. You are its guardian now, and you will keep the cycle going whether you want to or not." Clara's heart raced as the realization hit her. The land wasn't just an entity. It was a part of them. The curse was never just about the orphanage or the souls it had consumed. It was about them, the children, including Clara. They had become the land's new guardians, new vessels. Whether they had realized it or not, they were now the ones who kept the land alive. "No," Clara whispered again, shaking her head, trying to deny it. "We broke the curse. We destroyed it." Sister Magdalena's form grew larger, her power intensifying. "You did not destroy it. You fed it. And now, the land feeds on you. The cycle has begun again." Clara looked at the others, her eyes filled with terror. They had been free, but they weren't. They had never truly been free. The land had only bided its time, waiting for them to grow weak enough, for them to be vulnerable. The earth beneath them began to shift once more. The land was calling to them, calling to her. Clara felt the ground pulling at her, the land's power surging through her veins, trying to reclaim her. "No," she gasped, falling to her knees. "I can't," but something inside her stirred, something powerful, something fierce. She wasn't just Clara anymore. She was more than that. She was the one who had fought back, the one who had broken the curse, and now she realized it was her turn to decide the land's fate. With one final forceful cry, Clara reached deep inside herself, pushing back against the land's pull. She refused to be its vessel. She refused to become part of the cycle again. The earth trembled. Sister Magdalena screamed, her form flickering and fading. The land fought back, but Clara stood her ground. With one final push, she tore the land's power from her soul, from the others, and cast it into the void below. The ground was still. The darkness was gone. And for the first time, Clara felt completely free.